So thanks everyone for being here on what is, at least in Minnesota, somewhat of a snowy Tuesday for our monthly Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership webinar, the last of the year. My name is Greg Klinger, and I'm an extension educator in agricultural climate resilience at the University of Minnesota. I'll be facilitating the webinar today, which will be on the subject of navigating climate action in Duluth. And just a few logistical items before we get started. First, the webinar begins at noon and will end at 1 p.m. All participants are muted during the webinar. We'll have a Q&A session after the presentation is over. And the webinar will be recorded and may be posted online at a later date. So with that, we're going to hear today about community-based approaches to use federal climate funding over the next decade, and using lessons learned from the Duluth Energy Efficiency Program, the acronym DEEP, over the past 15 years. We'll hear about the importance of using design thinking and partnership development to accomplish climate and environmental justice work in Minnesota communities. Our speaker today is Jodi Slick. She's the founder and CEO of Equilibrium 3 and served as the principal investigator for Duluth's EPA Climate Showcase Communities and the Department of Energy's Solar Market Pathways project. She was recognized as a White House Champion of Change for adaptive retooling of the DEEP program for disaster recovery. So with that, Jodi, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, I'm excited to be here today. I happen to be traveling, so I'm in a small little pod in an airport that apparently has a slight annoying hum. So my apologies for that, but very excited to kind of share this moment in time with all of you. It's dynamically different than when last time we were having a conversation with MinCap, which was January. Now we have things like the IRA that has passed, et cetera, that really sets our opportunities and a whole bunch of challenges for the next decade. So we're going to go a little over the history of Equilibrium 3 and kind of how we approach our work. And if I can get a check that you can see that. Awesome. So Equilibrium 3 is a Duluth-based nonprofit organization. We actually have a wide variety of scales of our work. We do some things at a hyper-local scale that we'll be talking a lot about today. And then we've done things all the way up to national demonstration projects, et cetera. The background of Equilibrium 3 is our mission is to lead and inspire change in our community towards an equitable and sustainable future. We actually have been around a little over 10 years now. We spun off from a previous organization that I started called Common Ground Construction, which was really a leader in green affordable housing construction, as we worked with low-income individuals and actually even current state inmates to teach them the trades while enhancing affordable housing in our community. Right now, Equal 3 has 7 staff members, and we are augmented by the fact that we run an AmeriCorps Vista program. So we have Vistas that serve in our office on climate and energy, on transportation, on food access. And then because we run the program, we also have Vista team leaders. And that's actually been a really important way when we talk about feast and famine for doing community work to be able to work with some tremendous individuals out of the AmeriCorps program. I made a joke at the Climate Adaptation Awards in January when we were asked what we would do with $1 billion. You know, let's go to the land of insanity, because that's where we were really in January. Like, hey, if we could just get some resources, what would you do with it? And I kind of joked, I didn't need $1 billion. All I really needed was about $30 for a sledgehammer to bust some silos. And that's a theme that you're going to hear over and over again. And my lovely husband, instead of buying me flowers, bought me a sledgehammer after. So, and I actually am somewhat regretting being so kind of bombastic about that, because honestly, if I could use $1 billion. And now with some of the climate legislation that has passed recently, we have over 500 billion that is going to be invested. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means in our communities in Minnesota and in environmental justice neighborhoods. The way that Equilibrium 3 does our work is we recognize that there aren't enough resources to do everything that we'd like to. So we're always trying to optimize what resources are out there. We're, instead of kind of trying to do multiple solutions to fix one problem, what we're often trying to do is figure out what are those elegant solutions that may help us advance multiple challenges or help us take advantage of opportunities. We build on systems and design thinkings, bust silos whenever we can. And we really do believe that the best way to inform our work is to have those that are most impacted by the work that we're doing involved in the decision making. And kind of the story of Equilibrium 3, we have what we kind of call our story form. This is the process that we go through when we're looking at the type of work that we're going to do. And it always starts by understanding what is the challenge and recognizing that the challenge often is felt differently by different populations. And so we need to be really thinking through not just kind of like a very uniform way of thinking of the challenges ahead of us, but recognizing and thinking through that this might be different for a neighborhood, it might be different for a population, it might be different depending on the amount of resources you have, et cetera. Then we spend time really thinking through what is the vision of where we're going towards. It's not just about being against things. It's about how do we use our time and energy to move forward, creating a solution, and then whenever possible, trying to get into the situation of what are those co-benefits, where are there synergies, how can we enhance this action that we want to take, what are the resources that are needed, who are our partners, and then for us, it's really important that we get to implementation. Because we're not really making change until actions kind of make it all the way to the end of the pipeline. Then we need to evaluate, learn, iterate. And oftentimes it's about trying to figure out that story so that we can sell it to decision makers, so that when we find something that is successful, it's something that can be replicated and scaled. And this is actually a really, really common story form that you have probably seen all of your life, and some of the most important things that have happened in America have come out of this exact story form. And I'll give you an example of some of them. If you think about it, our work in community is a lot like an infomercial. We're kind of saying, are you tired of this? Would you like to see that? We've got the deal for you. We've got the solution. But wait, there's more. If we do it this way, you can have this and this and this, and the time is now. And we want to maximize the resources. So it's on sale. Just a little bit of shipping and handling that we need to sell you. So those are for people, especially of a certain generation. This is what was on one of your 3 channels. At certain times of the week, etc. But this is how that kind of applies in community with climate. Oops. Here's one project that we did. It's the Lincoln Park Solar Garden. And part of the challenge that was defined here is that in Minnesota, we do not have a uniform policy environment as we think about things like energy transition. Up north, we can kind of look down south in Excel territory, and we could see, megawatts and megawatts of solar community projects that were being developed. And that's because of the solar law that said a few things. The utility has to buy your power, they have to pay the value of solar, et cetera. And we don't have that same enabling legislation up north. And so this was a project where we were able to partner and kind of take advantage of the fact that Minnesota Power had some low income solar dollars. And so we were able to propose a 40 kilowatt array. And it was the first one really proposed by a community organization instead of really kind of developed by the utility. And so for us, it was important to be able to kind of do that proof of concept in Minnesota Power territory that this is possible. But kind of going back to that infomercial, but wait, there's more. Like, we were very intentional when we put this project together to put it on a piece of land that really is on I-35 and is what all of kind of the visitors to our community, if they're going downtown, Canal Park, Bentleyville, et cetera, would see that, because we wanted to have this project kind of help show be kind of like a flag indicating that yes, solar is possible in Duluth, and that we're a community that's starting to look at energy transition. It also happens to be the land that, if instead of driving into downtown, happens to be the entrance to the neighborhood that we work most deeply in, the Lincoln Park neighborhood. And that's an environmental justice area where residents are actually in the lowest 0.5% of life expectancy for all of Minnesotans. When you think of the EJ screen, 11 out of 11 indicators are over 60%. It's a Justice 40 area. It's high poverty, et cetera. And so this was an opportunity to start saying that, like, when we think about our neighborhood, we want people to start thinking about our neighborhood dynamically different. And it's next to the Cross City Trail. So, it has the opportunity over time to grow into something that really is kind of an iconic entrance that also looks at other climate issues. And what we were able to do, so kind of but wait, there's more. The power that's generated from here is actually split in a couple of ways. 75% of the value of that power actually goes into an emergency energy fund to help families that are facing utility disconnection. And I do have to say that was designed before the pandemic. And so, the need there is just insane at this point. And then 25% of it actually goes to support transitional housing for veterans. And not only because that's a vulnerable population, but we recognize that many people are veterans because they've been spending time trying to secure energy resources for this country. One thing that's great about this particular story, and again, when we talk about, is there a solution that can bring people together, is that once we wanted to move forward with this project, we were actually able to really cross-pollinate some partnerships of people that sometimes are actually on opposite sides of issues. And so we had Minnesota Power and Solar Company and veterans. We had philanthropy. It was awarded an innovation award from the U.S. Council of Mayors. We had private philanthropy. We had environmental organizations. We had the state. We had faith groups, et cetera. And so sometimes we have the ability to cut through some of the conflict that we just assume with partners, if we can come up with a solution that's going to meet multiple needs. And so one of the challenges that we always have in community is, where does an individual solution kind of fit within the larger picture? And a few years back, when the city of Duluth did their update to the comprehensive plan, for the first time, they actually added energy as one of their work groups. And that was absolutely great, but it was kind of quite clear coming out of that process that the city is kind of lead by doing, and there was so much that the city needed to do in their own operations that they weren't necessarily right off the bat going to be thinking about the larger community action. And with the city of Duluth, their operations are really only about 4% of the entire community's footprint. And so ECO3 stepped in with the Duluth Climate and Energy Network with, again, a wide variety of partners that you see here, to look at what is it that we need to be doing in Duluth as a broader community, recognizing that the city itself cannot solve climate, that we are all part of that solution. And so we put together a Duluth Climate and Energy, the Duluth Climate and Energy Network helped put together then a Duluth Citizens Climate Action Plan. And that followed the methodology really of Project Drawdown, looking at what are the most impactful things that we can do, and then kind of downscaling that to our particular community. And it was actually informed by a whole bunch of other things too, as it relates to environmental justice, Minnesota information, et cetera. We, in putting together that plan, which was really led by Laura Wedge in our office, we ended up breaking it into, like, what are the actions? What do you need to learn about those actions? How can you take those actions individually? How can you take them at your place of work? How can you help make that a collective action? And then also, and I think this is a really rich portion of the plan, did really an inventory and catalog of all of the different initiatives that are always happening, or that are already happening in our community. Because oftentimes people become passionate and they want to get involved in something, and they don't always pause to see how they can augment efforts that are already happening. So sometimes in the environmental and climate side, we end up with lots of different groups doing exactly the same thing. And it could be stronger if we were a little bit more deliberate in the way that we approach that. What the plan ended up spinning out very much in alignment with Project Drawdown was that there are 4 areas in Duluth that we really needed to focus on. And kind of the most impactful action in each of those areas were determined. So food and agriculture, develop a local ecologically sound food system that enables and encourages us to grow, process, and distribute food in our own community. On transportation, prioritize street design and modes of transportation that put people first, like walking, biking, and public transportation. Buildings, make our buildings more energy efficient and fueled by clean and efficient energy. And energy production, move our electricity production to renewables and support the development of community-owned, locally produced clean energy. None of that is going to be a surprise to the group that's sitting here today. But I think some of the weaving that we have found really important at Equilibrium 3 really comes from not only looking at that from more of the global lens, or I guess it's the city of Duluth isn't global, but that larger lens, and actually again looking at those that are most impacted and maybe the ones that are most likely to be kind of left behind as we talk about this energy transition. And so I like this as a definition of environmental justice as we talk about frontline communities. A frontline community are those experiencing the most immediate and worst impacts. And a frontline community group, which is Equilibrium 3, are those with a primary mission to represent and serve our community, improving living situations by addressing the root causes. And we, as an organization, are in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. Not only are we in Lincoln Park, but we are the community-based organization that leads a wide variety of efforts in that neighborhood, from the Main Street Business Group to looking at health, et cetera. And we're in the Lincoln Park 156, and that refers, if we're talking about kind of like our most hyper local work, that's one census tract. But it is the one census tract where, again, the residents have huge health disparities. It's the census tract that has the craft district, so kind of a historic main street that went through 40 years of disinvestment. It's where we have housing that is some of the oldest housing stock in the state. It's where we have the port. And when we think about environmental justice, I once actually heard a conversation happening with a grants selection committee in which they said our neighborhood was actually not a water neighborhood. That we weren't really, we're not a lakeside neighborhood, we're not on the river, etc. And it just absolutely shocked me that when we think about environmental justice, we have 11 miles of shorefront, but all but a few hundred feet of that is taken up by industrial resources. And we're split from the water by the interstate. And so like that to me is like even people's own ideas, their own identity has been split from what could be absolutely amazing. We're actually on the world's largest freshwater estuary. Like that's crazy awesome for a neighborhood. But we are also absolutely kind of disconnected from that. So we work in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. We've just completed a project with the CDC to create a social determinants of health accelerator plan. And it involved 12 neighborhood organizations and 8 healthcare organizations, over 300 residents. And it's kind of a different way to look at also, this idea of climate action. And there, very similar things were looked at. We looked at food access, and we can take that like, hey, we need to localize food, which comes out of the climate action plan. And then this is what that means to one neighborhood. Lincoln Park has a 7-day-a-week grocery store that provides complete variety of USDA food basket options at an affordable price and is accessible to residents within 15 minutes without the need for a personal vehicle. Because here is a neighborhood that has no food access. The residents in general shop, grocery shop at a gas station. And so the work that Equilibrium 3 is doing in this particular area is we actually have 3 things that are going on, and it's in alignment with the climate action plan. It is about production, it is about processing, and it's about retail. And so in partnership with Lake Superior College, which is just outside our neighborhood, we have taken on the administration of what they had been calling their living lab. So it's about 6,000 square feet of greenhouse, 2.5 acres of egg land. And that is now being pivoted towards protection or production of food to benefit the neighborhood. Just in case you don't get it, on the right hand side, that's how we pick iceberg lettuce. Yeah, okay. I know we always blame Dad for these type of jokes, but there you have it. So that's on the production side. On the processing side, we actually administer a 15,000 square foot community center in Lincoln Park that we are pivoting to being a resilience hub. And as part of that, there's an old serving kitchen in that center that we're actually going to be remodeling now into a commercial kitchen. So we can do things like community food prep, as well as support small entrepreneurs as they are working on preparing food for things like farmers markets, et cetera. And then the third and kind of most important thing to our neighborhood is that we have on Superior Street, where Equilibrium 3's office used to be, we have been working and will next year be opening a small footprint grocery store. Just about 1,800 square feet, but it's a grocery store that's designed specifically to emphasize real food as well as affordability, especially for those that are receiving benefits. Because in our neighborhood, again, kind of that small census tract, residents on average make only 42% of the state's median income, and over half of them don't have access to a vehicle. So trying to drive miles to a grocery store is really, really hard. So we're excited about that. And that's an example when we are looking at some of the federal resources that are coming down right now with the lens that we have through the Biden administration of the benefit coming into these communities. We were able to secure some healthy food finance and some USDA funds to support kind of that food trinity. Transportation, that's one that has been very challenging in our neighborhood. And this is where the idea of federal funding and environmental justice and the idea of Justice 40 becomes really important. Because in that one small census tract, over the course of a decade, we're seeing over $2.5 billion of investment in transportation. And so, you know, from our point of view as a neighborhood organization, we've had to make the point that that's $2.5 billion, but you don't get to wear a halo for it. It's important because it's infrastructure that is supporting the port. It's important because it's infrastructure that's connecting Minnesota and Wisconsin. But the benefit of most of that infrastructure is not at all to our neighborhood because it's not human scale. And again, we have a whole bunch of people that do not have access to a private vehicle. So that $2.5 billion of investment and 10 years of pounding and dust for the Twin Ports interchange and the replacement of the Blotnick Bridge and the Highway 53, et cetera, isn't benefit. That's the burden that this neighborhood bears on behalf of everyone. So we were able to actually work with the city of Duluth and make that as a very successful argument recently. And the very first competitive grant round of the bill or the bipartisan infrastructure law for DOT raised dollars, we were able to secure $840 shy of 25 million to be able to actually rebuild the main corridor through our neighborhood as a human scale intervention to create a climate forward active transportation corridor in our neighborhood that is really about meeting what the neighborhood is asked for, that climate forward street design where we're focusing on accessibility, transportation equity, and safety. And so we're really excited about that because in Duluth, we have had bike lanes face like the death of 1,000 cuts. And this is now an opportunity where that 25 million is based on the idea that it is going to be human centric, not necessarily car sector centric. And we're working with NREL because we received local energy action plan technical assistance. So we have a 1.5-year relationship basically with NREL. And one thing that they're helping us out is helping us think through, okay, well, if we're going to be rebuilding this street now, what does that look like from a climate perspective, from a charging perspective, from a transit perspective, et cetera, so that we're building a street for 2050 and 2060 and 2070. Because I have to tell you, like the utility layer of this street that will be redone is 140 years old. So like the decisions that we're going to be making for the rebuild of this main corridor, the human scale decisions are really important, that we are very forward focused when we look at that. Oops. And this is where we have like a lot of that kind of cross pollination that happens. When the Citizens Climate Action Plan was put forward, there's been an effort that I'll talk a little bit more about to kind of move more people in our community to doing those climate actions. And we just earlier this month launched a project called the Get Green app. And, in our neighborhood, we have to be looking at other transportation solutions. And we look at micromobility as one of those things that are going to become really important in our neighborhood. And it can't be, rent a scooter, use it for a half an hour and pay $22. We need to figure out, it's not about getting more and more of our residents to have a private car. It's really about what are some of those downscaled solutions that we can be looking at in a new way. On the building side, we have really since our days done an energy efficiency program called the Duluth Energy Efficiency Program. And from a neighborhood point of view, what people want are safe, healthy, resilient, and affordable housing. 70% of the lower portion of our neighborhood are actually renters. And so we face that idea of the split incentive in which the individuals who are paying the utility bills are generally not the ones that can make the improvements to the homes. And that's something we have to be addressing as now all of these different IRA resources come through. And it might be very difficult to see any of the details on that chart. But what it's really showing is that deep red, or, really tall bar that seems to be like really out of scale compared to everything else you see there. That's the age of the housing in our neighborhood. Where we've got, over 60% of it is pre-1939. And that compares it to St. Louis County and Minnesota and the nation. And if we're going to be seriously talking about energy transition in this kind of new era of IRA and federal funding, et cetera, I have this kind of like house across the street test. If we can't figure out how the house across the street, with all of the complexities of perhaps rental or income or age of housing, or the wiring, or people's knowledge, if we can't solve how that house across the street is going to meet our climate goals, then what are we doing? Because, oftentimes I think a lot of our solutions are, let's do some modeling on down, but the way in which we get action and the way in which we reduce our carbon is starting in that house across the street and going up, to hundreds of homes, to thousands of homes, to millions of homes, et cetera. And that's the challenge that we jointly have to solve. The program that we've previously had, it was called the Duluth Energy Efficiency Program. It's something that we have rebranded to Eco3 Energy. But what it recognized was that even people who were getting energy audits when we started this program, less than 2% of them were actually doing anything with that information. And so the Duluth Energy Efficiency Program used design thinking to try to figure out, like, what's the break there? And part of that break was people didn't actually know, even if they had an energy audit, what they should do. And it was because the electric utility was telling them one thing, the gas utility may tell them something else. The window guy, guess what? He thinks you need windows. The furnace guy said, no, what you really need to be doing is your furnace. And so we created a program that was really about a third party, in which we weren't selling any of those things. We weren't being incented, to do one fuel over another, et cetera. But instead, we were really the representative of the homeowner. Like, these are the things that you can invest in that are going to have the best return on investment. Second challenge is, how do I pay for it? And, when people don't know, or they're afraid they might miss out on something, often what happens is just inaction. And so kind of like a financial aid officer at a campus, oh, you're doing this that qualifies for this low interest loan. You can get $50 here. Here's a rebate there, et cetera. Giving people the sense that if they choose to move forward and get improvements done, they're not missing out. The third thing is who can do it, or how can I do it myself? And that's going to be one of our really big challenges right now, because the scale of the problem and the scale of our opportunity right now is totally undercut by not having enough trained individuals to actually do the type of housing changes that could be facilitated with the IRA over the next 10 years. And so what we did is we actually would run, we determine the scope of work, we'd get kind of approval on that scope of work, and then we would actually bid it out. And what we would ask of the homeowner is, would you be willing to have a contractor open house for 1 hour? And then what we would do is we would have a bank of contractors that would all go to that house during that 1 hour, so that we could get multiple bids. But it was to take that bar and make it as low as possible. And then, of course, homeowners are curious. Well, how did the bids turn out? And then finally, the other barrier that we saw was this idea of they weren't sure if it was going to be done right. When we started this work back in 2008 as Common Ground, there was still an awful lot of hangover from the late 70s and early 80s, in which, the wisdom on the street was, you don't want to tighten your house, it's going to rot from the inside. So really helping people understand that we have building performance tools and methodologies, and that we could sit there again as a third party and assure that there was some quality to the work that was done by the contractor. And if you wanted to do it yourself, because we have a lot of that going on in Minnesota, here's a way in which you can learn how to do it yourself. We can do a different audit if that's what you're interested in. So there's more time for that kind of dialogue. And we actually even worked out with some building material suppliers that if somebody got an audit, they could get a discount if they were buying caulk or other things. That is a program that once we built that capacity of doing third-party project management, when the floods hit in northeastern Minnesota and FEMA didn't come to help our households, we were able to pivot that program and say, oh, well, if you're going to rebuild hundreds of homes after a disaster, what do you need? You need to assess the situation, develop a scope of work, find out who's going to do the work, figure out how it's going to be paid for, and make sure that it's done right. And that's what we received our White House recognition for. And I maintain that when we look at these next 10 years, that type of navigation is going to be absolutely essential, because otherwise you're going to have people who have the capacity that will grab those resources, and that's great because we all need to be moving forward. But those that again might be renters, so there's that added difficulty of working with a landlord, or those that have not done this type of work, or those that are working 2 jobs, or those are the individuals that could use the benefit of the reducing their energy burden the most are probably the least likely to be able to take advantage of this. One thing that I'm really excited about, and this ties back on that transportation side, is that because we were able to secure the RAISE grant, and we know, and starting in about 2025, we'll be rebuilding Superior Street through Lincoln Park. That actually gives us the opportunity to think about capturing the waste heat from the wastewater treatment plant, WLSSD, from their effluent. I think their effluent's at about 97, 98 degrees. And we could capture that heat and in alignment with the rebuild of Superior Street, actually look at the potential of meeting the heating needs of about 2.1 million square feet of Lincoln Park, and shifting that from fossils now onto that renewable source. And why I think that's important from an environmental justice point of view is downtown Duluth already has the district heat system. They've completed a big project to shift as many of the buildings as they could into a 3rd generation looped water system. And that's been really important for distribution, efficiency, et cetera. They've been looking at the idea of how they could tap in to that waste heat from WLSSD. And from an environmental justice point of view, what that would have meant is that would have meant that our neighborhood, which has had the burden of the wastewater treatment plant for decades, it is amazing what that plant has done for cleaning up our environment, but it's still in our neighborhood. What we would have been doing is we would have just been piping the benefit of that to a different neighborhood, a more resourced area. And so there's a current DOE application that we worked on with the city, Evergreen Energy, and then a whole bunch of partners regarding job opportunities, et cetera. And there's a possibility that we could actually plan not only to be able to use that energy locally, but there actually probably is enough that we could still meet the needs of the downtown system. But we get to kind of start where the burden is and see that as a benefit. And if we think about that for environmental justice communities, one of the very definitions of an environmental justice community is they may be the host of the wastewater treatment plant. Like, this is a model. It's been done in Northern Europe, but it hasn't been done here in the US. And that's big. That is huge for the type of opportunities. If we're thinking a little bit more outside of the box, and if we're thinking at a scale and thinking about systems that could be possible and could be led from Minnesota. And the other image that you see there is again, here's a tool that we put together with the university under some solar market pathways funding. And what it did is it made it where a solar installer could basically sit at their computer and have a good understanding about what type of solar resource that you have. And can even do some sizing of systems, et cetera. It gave the power to the individual homeowner to be able to look up their own information. And it's those type of tools that can reduce soft costs and can kind of democratize the information that are going to be really important as we move forward in the next 10 years. So the Get Green app, this is a partnership that's just been launched. And if you know Nina Axelson, she's amazing. She has Grid Catalyst, so she's been working with a number of startups. One of those is Get Green. They're an organization that's trying to kind of use the power of app to get lots of members of a community to be kind of like socially active in doing climate action. And we were very fortunate in that it's a national app that they're trying to launch, but they wanted to see what it would be like if they were to localize it for a community. And so Laura and Maya and Cameron and Reese, some of our AmeriCorps Vistas, have been doing an amazing job working with them, launched it earlier this month. And what it does is you can actually now go in. If you happen to put in a Duluth zip code, you'll end up in a Duluth specific app. It has some of the climate actions you can take nationally. But if you go to the Explore, you can actually see those things that came out of the Duluth Citizens Climate Action Plan. And you have the opportunity then for us to kind of like locally prompt, for example, that conversation we may be needing to have with our utility. And what it does is also allows us to kind of push out different goals in different weeks. So we feel like we're taking collective action. And you can, there's some groupings of actions that you can take. So it's kind of like earning different badges. And as people take action, they're actually supporting the ability for us to do projects within the community. So the more actions you take, you're able to earn leaves, and those leaves are going to translate into us being able to do a micro-mobility hub and test that out in our neighborhood. You're able to kind of watch leaderboards. Again, like, let's use social science to kind of move our community forward. It's a place now where we can push out things like events, as well as, if a council action is coming up, how people can get engaged in that. We can see what are the types of actions that people are taking in our community. And so it's pretty cool app, and we're just again in that launch phase. So we welcome people to check that out. One other thing that we're working on with the city of Duluth is the city of Duluth was just awarded a DOE Renewables Accelerating Clean Energy, or Community Energy Resilience. And there's two parts of that. There's the opportunity now for the city to be doing some really deep exploration of sites in Duluth, and where solar and storage would be beneficial for community resilience. And part of this is coming because when we had a blowdown and we ended up with parts of our community without power for over a week, Duluth was actually about 15 minutes away from not having water. Think about that. We sit on 10% of the world's accessible fresh water, but our system, could have been in a situation in which it wasn't resilient enough to meet the needs of our community. So the city will be doing kind of that top-down asset-based approach, looking at power resilience. And Equilibrium 3 and some of our community partners are actually going to be doing what I think is some fascinating community-based research. And that is that if you're an individual, different power outage scenarios affect you differently. If you end up without power for a week, it's much different if it's 20 below, if it's 100 degrees, or if it's in the middle of a high rain event. And so this work is going to be looking at what are the negative impacts when we have different disruption scenarios that are informed by our HAZUS plan and our professionals. And then who faces those impacts on what type of timeline and how much do they cost? Can we find out what kind of the distribution of those negative or lack of resilience is for our community, so that we can be much more targeted on our solution set? Sometimes those are going to be big systems, like we do need to do some hardening of the grid here. Sometimes the best solution is actually on a house by house basis. If we have a power outage during a high rain event, we may need to be looking at what is our backup sump pumps, so we're not facing $20,000 a house in basement damage. And then sometimes we need to be looking at shared solutions like a cooling center. And so I'm really looking forward to this work because it's going to inform how we think about those investments with the federal funds. And then one of the final things that I want to say is that oftentimes, this is hard work. And, oftentimes like we are having to respond to, this opportunity, that opportunity, et cetera. But it's rare that anybody asks the holistic question about like, what do you need, in community to do this work? And a couple of things that I wanted to highlight is one, a recognition of something that I'm now calling inspiration fatigue. I think we've all heard of compassion fatigue because of the pandemic. We are at like this opportunity moment for because of the work that's happened on the federal side. It'll be really interesting, post-election to see what those opportunities are on the state side, et cetera. But every time an organization like ours or a city, puts out that grant application, we're putting our heart out there. And then we're being told to wait for 5 months or 6 months or 7 months or 8 months. And it's kind of like a rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, and rinse and repeat. And so, if we can figure out where and how we can fund holistic visions and not just this small piece because it's the DOE, or this because it's the EPA, or this because it's the left-handed folks and solar panels or whatever, would be really helpful. We need to shake up some assumptions. There's this idea that if you build it, they will come. Like, let's do the really best information campaign we can about the IRA tax credits, and the rebates that'll eventually come out, et cetera. Well, that's great. We want awareness, but we need something that's going to be much deeper. We need handholding. We need navigation. We need that third-party trusted advisor like we modeled under the Duluth Energy Efficiency Program. And we need to be investing in that specifically for those populations that are most impacted and often most forgot. We really need to talk about scale. we can come up with all of the awesome solutions. And I love our Lincoln Park solar garden. It was what we needed at the time. It's 40 kilowatts. It's not going to save the world. And you know, it's the house across the street and the fact that we've got millions of those that we need to be dealing with. And then we need fewer Rube Goldberg machines. Like, it seems that if we're really going to do the climate action, we need to shrink down all of the different actions that it takes and make it as linear from we want this result to getting this result done, as opposed to all of these other things that we try to do because we want that result. And the inner energy Greek, and just about done, is, you know, we know that often when we're expending energy, and to me, this is about all of us as professionals, we're spending a lot of energy. And it often means that a lot of that energy, and kind of goes back to that Rube Goldberg machine, is kind of lost. And so what we really need is we need to be thinking about that cogeneration with each other. We need to be figuring out how we can augment efforts. And from that, we are going to get much closer. And we're at this moment in time in which the opportunities are there, and the challenge is there. And we need to do it now, not 10 years from now and 20 years from now and 30 years from now. So I invite, you know, how do we co-generate these solutions and action? And one that I would say that I think is going to be really important is the idea that we need to be figuring out how we get improvements done, not only in kind of our urban areas with renters, et cetera, but really where we don't have a lot of that kind of capacity. How do we do it in our rural community? Because if we leave our rural areas behind, we have not only kind of continued to exacerbate this idea of have and have not, but we've deepened that chasm as it relates to climate. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, and I guess open it up to questions.
Great, thanks, Jodi. There are a couple questions in the chat or in the Q&A, so we'll go ahead and go through those. And if anyone else has questions, we have about 6 minutes, so we might be able to get to them. So first question is from Bethany. And if this is I think this is in reference to the supplemental nutrition program. And if it's a little outside of your area of expertise, that's fine. But she's asking, what should we look for in the 2023 Farm Bill that will help small scale community initiatives?
I love the question. And I would say that this is kind of drinking from a fire hose right now. You know, what we're doing as an organization is we see a particular funding opportunity, and we're quickly assessing, is this something that could help move forward one of our initiatives? And if not, we're really not able to engage in it. And I think that's one of the burdens that we're also seeing. Like, I really appreciate the fact that our federal government and our state is trying to do things like get input into how we're going to launch this program, do this, do that, et cetera. And I would just say, from a community organization point of view, you know, we're nights and weekends right now just trying not to miss an opportunity to actually be able to implement. We have very little, if any, capacity to respond to an RFI or even track, you know, some of these other conversations. And that's why we have to have this co-generation. We have to have those organizations that are, you know, knowledgeable on the policy side, that because we have a relationship, they might reach out to us like, hey, would this help you? Or what do you think? Because we can't track it, you know, all of these other things. And that's why we also need advocates. I think sometimes, though, the implementers have kind of been left out of some of our climate conversations, and that's really where we need to be this next decade.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Sharon. Can you tell us more about working with AmeriCorps Vistas, and what works well about that partnership and what's a challenge?
Okay, so I was just thinking, like, hey, I could have a little bit of fun with a couple of our vistas right now by saying, well, the biggest challenge is, and then like dot, 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 throw their name in there. But so I think that from a Vista point of view, Vista is about capacity building And I think one of the challenges that we've seen is that the AmeriCorps program overall actually does have some of their own silos. Like our Vistas can do capacity building, which can help build the program, can help on policies, can help on communications, can help on resource development, volunteer recruitment management. That's all great, and that's all absolutely needed. But Vistas can't do direct service. So, if we actually need to, get a team into a building, we can do that with some summer vistas, but we can't do it with a year-round vistas. The direct service is more of your AmeriCorps flavor, your standard AmeriCorps flavor. And your standard AmeriCorps, they can't, for example, work on trying to do fundraising, et cetera. And so from our point of view, figuring out what are some of those models in which you can have one AmeriCorps member be a little bit more flexible to deal with the complexity of the solutions that we're trying to develop. We actually just yesterday applied for a planning grant. There's a program that our energy auditor that you saw in that photo went through. It's called Green Iowa. And there, especially to kind of meet some of that rural weatherization, energy needs, et cetera, they actually have a crew that can go out and do some of those direct installs and weatherization. And I would say that in this moment of time, we'd like to explore being able to put that together to start filling in some of that gap in the rural area, but not just on the energy side. We have an aging population. So if we have an AmeriCorps crew in a house, can they do the things that need to happen for that to be aging in place? Can they analyze that house so that house is actually rain ready? And then can they also look at things that would make that a healthy home? To me, again, where's the center of the Venn diagram of impact for individual households, and then our state overall.
Great, thank you. One more question here, and I think we'll call it there. But before we do that, just so everyone's aware, we put in the chat just a quick evaluation link. If you don't mind doing that and filling that out, we always appreciate that. So that's in the chat. Now this question, maybe you've heard some of the,
Oh, yeah.
Yes, okay. There's a lot of press about Duluth being very, climate resilient in terms of to heat and so on. So how is the area thinking about climate migrants?
I have been interviewed even by like the German media on this topic. It's one of those things that actually to some extent very much frustrates me because I've talked to realtors that are already seeing where people are now buying homes sight unseen in Duluth, because maybe there's somebody that has faced wildfires, or they're coming from a part of a country where their subdivision is now having their water delivered, et cetera. So they hear the national news, Duluth is the place to be. So we have people buying houses sight unseen because 10 years from now, they want to make sure that they have a place. And the problem that we're running into is the fact that we haven't dealt yet with the equity within our own community. And so, the climate migrant narrative has this added kind of like green gentrification or displacement potential pressure. And so we recognize it, but I think that's why there's like this added burden of how as a community are we going to take this moment in time and do it right. Do it right for those that choose to come to our community, but not do it poorly on the backs of those that are already here that haven't had that same level of equity, ownership, health, energy, opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Jodi. I thought that was a very nice way to address that. It's a challenging issue, I know. So again, thank you very much for sharing your time and your expertise today, Jodi. I think given that it's 1 after 1, we'll probably go ahead and stop the webinar here in a second. Safe travels, and thanks everyone for being here, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.
Mm-hmm.